All right, hey folks, Faz here from Fazlifts. Now today's video is going to be to do with how to know whether you're a beginner, intermediate or advanced and why that's important, and ultimately to make your entire YouTube experience more productive and more beneficial for you as an individual. Okay, but firstly, thanks for making it onto my channel. If you have any questions or comments, pop them down below. And if you'd like to work with me on your own strength and physique goals, there's a link in the description. So what are we talking about? Now, this is a problem that I see with people trying to assimilate information on YouTube in general, okay? Understanding context is 100% crucial, right? Much of the complex stuff discussed on YouTube is aimed at audiences who are in the intermediate to advanced stage. And it's almost always the beginners who feel they need that level of complexity. A guy comes into this whole bodybuilding endeavor and wants to know all the secrets to make maximum progress. So he's just starting out in the gym. He's already on a bro split. He's taking the pre-workouts. He's taking the supplements. He's got all these ideas about what it takes to be a bodybuilder. You know the kind. Some of you might be that yourself. So before you've even stepped foot into the gym, you've bought all the latest clothes, you've got the pre-workout, you've got the protein supplement, you've got the creatine before you even really know how to train. These are all extras which can be seen as distractions. And as well as that, probably more damaging than that, is the training information, which leads people to just switch routines every couple of weeks. So we have to understand context so we know what advice to take and what advice to ignore. And if any of you have ever read my beginner book, The Noob, you'll realize that that's a very important theme in the progression from being a beginner to being an intermediate. You have to know what's applicable to you, focus on that, focus on a few select things which allow you to get away from that first beginner stage. So it's not just about beginners, this video, it's also about intermediates and advanced and how they know where they're at and also ultimately how they can make progress. But the important thing really with this video is to understand that these classifications we have, beginner, advanced, and intermediate, they're not just related to age or training age. There are actually specific responses to training. So my aim with this video is to help you to understand that and also ultimately to help to enhance your entire YouTube experience so you know what to listen to and what to discard. All right. But firstly, before we get into that, I just want to cover this. Is the term beginner offensive? I watched a video recently where the YouTuber was trying to make the case that the word beginner was actually an oppressive, offensive word, and we need to do away with beginners. And he was chastising those people who used the word beginner and saying that it was an ego thing. He was saying that they would call people beginners in an offensive way. I just want to clarify, I don't believe that. I don't call people beginners or intermediate or advanced in an offensive, oppressive way. And I think the suggestion that beginner is an oppressive term is a little bit too close to woke social justice warrior kind of culture for my liking. I'm not going to go too far into that rabbit hole because this is not a political channel, but for me, it's a little bit too woke to say we should cancel the term beginner. I think it shouldn't be used as a means to boost someone's ego, but at the same time, it has its uses. And as I'm going to explain in this video, there are very important classifications which allow you to know what stage you're at so you can disseminate and assimilate the information correctly. Okay, but that's my basic first quick rant on that. So firstly, defining beginners, really quite simple. It is your ability to make progress from one session to another. So if you train on something on a Monday, so let's say you train on bench presses for 3 sets of 10, and you progress on that by adding a rep by Wednesday, great. That's what a beginner is capable of doing. In general, maybe 1 or 2 sessions they'll miss off, especially if their food isn't quite right. But in general, it's the ability to make progress from one session to another. So that could be multiple times per week on the same exercise and on the same repetition schemes. Okay, it's the ability to make progress really without any major programming finesse. It's the ability to make progress easily. And again, if you look at my beginner book, The Noob, you'll see that the routine there, it's really designed to set you up for more gains later. The actual routine is mostly unimportant. It's just consistency and learning the lessons of how food connects to training and how your ability to move correctly is going to set you up for a better path down the road. Pretty much anything done consistently should get you out of the beginner stage. So really, it's more about how can I do to set myself up for better gains down the road. So being a beginner is your ability to progress, quote unquote, easily. Now, this has nothing to do with actual training age. So if you've been training for 3 years, particularly the last 3 years we've had, where gym access has maybe been sporadic. But if you consistently lock yourself in, you can probably gain a rep or two or a pound or two on your bench press, squat, and deadlift. And you can do that maybe 2 or 3 times a week. Great. You're still a beginner. Congratulations. Now, the actual poundages aren't that related to whether you're a beginner or not. Like, I'll point you in the direction of the British deadlifter Andy Bolton, who deadlifted 500 pounds the first time he even approached a barbell, and he eventually went on to deadlift over 1,000. Another guy called Bob Bernardsky, who was a US weightlifting champion in the 60s. He basically had the same exact routine from when he was a beginner to when he was advanced, when he was winning world championships. So he was still basically a beginner at that stage, which is mind-boggling to think about it, because he never really untapped his full potential. But you could argue, well, he didn't need to because he was a world champion, so who cares? But also, a lot of pro bodybuilders essentially don't really know a great deal about training or diet. It was quite amusing to me. I was watching a podcast last year, and there was the revelation of progressive overload to one of the bodybuilders on that podcast. It was incredible for me to watch. He was saying, yeah, some of these guys, like Nick Walker, they just do the same routine and add weight every week. It's crazy. I'm sat at home like, this guy who's 260 pounds thinks it's crazy that people progress weights from week to week. So there you go. The level of knowledge of some of these advanced guys shows that they are still beginners. They don't really know what the hell they're doing, and progress is still incredibly easy for them. They don't need to utilize even a solid progressive overload plan to progress. It's just genetic potential and more drugs. And on that note, steroid use is essentially what allows these guys to remain as beginners, because they don't need the training complexity and they can make progress from week to week and session to session. Steroid use essentially takes people's training age and puts it right back to beginner stage again. And that's the definition of a beginner. It's easy to make gains. So what a lot of these guys will do is they'll rely on their genetics and take higher and higher amounts of drugs, and that's essentially their entire careers, which then gets exposed because they say things like they say things like progressive overload being novel for them. But anyway, so the idea of a beginner is you are able to make progress from one session to another relatively unscathed and quite easily. Now, when it comes to intermediates, this is when session to session progress typically stops working. Week to week and month to month progress is generally still acceptable. However, it usually comes with needing some changes. Now, for me, this was some type of periodization and of load. So a deload loading paradigm for me was what enabled me to push from beginner stage past intermediate and into advanced. That was the ticket for me. My food was fine. My volume was fine. I needed some more upper body volume, and I was training hard. But in general, load variation was what I needed. It was a small change, but it required something, and that allowed me to push forward, eventually to become advanced. So at this stage, session to session stuff stops working. You need some type of change. And really, this is probably where the majority of YouTubers sit, as in the majority of audience sits. They've passed the beginner stage. They've done enough that they are now out there on the internet looking for information to say, what can I do? What else can I do? And this is where people typically fall into the mire of routine changing, not really committing to a full weight gain phase, and not really implementing the right things, usually when things start to get choppy and changing. What should be a little bit of information leading to a small change to move them forward turns into consuming a lot of information and many, many changes, which really puts a dampener on the progress. So intermediates defined, small changes leading to progress. At this point, don't run into the mistake of continuously making more and more changes over the course of time. Make a change, stick to it, stick to a plan, allow it to evolve over the next couple of months, and then make a change as and when it's needed. But allow yourself the time for your results to actualize. Everything slows down in the intermediate phase relative to the beginner phase. That means your evaluation period for a change must slow down as well. So if you make a change, you must execute it for about 4 to 8 to even 12 weeks before you really can evaluate whether it's worked or not. Really pay heed to that as an intermediate. It will save you a lot of heartache. Otherwise, you are just going from routine to routine change to change, never really giving it a chance to settle and evaluate. You have to slow down your expectations. And really, that's a big thing with intermediates. Slow down your expectations. So the point of this section is, one, that's how you know you're an intermediate. You have come up to a stall and you need some fine tuning. And the second thing is, because everything is a lot slower at this point, you must slow down your evaluation period, lengthen your evaluation period, give it 8 to 12 weeks before you can sit down and go, okay, did that work or not? Be patient. Next thing is advanced. Now, with the advanced, the definition of being advanced is they've already been through the beginner and intermediate phases. So they've been through the patient phase. They are already patient, okay? To push forward at this stage, training demands more complexity. It does. It's pretty much mandated. At a certain level, optimization is the key. Most people won't get to this level that they need optimization because they'll be too impatient in the intermediate phase, so they'll never actually progress forward. They won't stick to something for long enough. They'll keep tinkering so that they won't get to the advanced stage where they have to tinker. There's a big difference there. So when you're at this stage, basically, you're going to know you're here. Okay, you would have made it. You would have stuck to routines for long enough. You would have bust through plateaus. You would have really tried hard to be patient with it. Now, the two golden tickets which completely circumvent training complexity at this stage is overfeeding and drugs. Getting to this point, you can pretty much get through this stage or to this stage via just stuffing yourself full of food and drugs. And I've seen that happen simply because food and drugs will cover a lot of training mistakes. It will mean you don't really need to know what you're doing. Just feed, drugs, and you'll progress. And you can push past pretty much any plateau with those two in mind. Again, it's one of those things where you start to question who to listen to at this stage if that's what their training experience comprises of. And that's just something to be aware of. So in any case, my summary and my concluding thoughts: classifications are important because they give us a broad starting point for training recommendations. For you listening to this video, it's important for you to know where you're at so you know what information to take in and what to ignore. If you're a beginner, you really don't need half the stuff on the internet. Like, I'll just flat out say it. You don't. You need the message to work hard, knuckle on, and get out of the beginner stage. You also don't need elaborate routines. You need to train each body part probably multiple times per week so that you can hit the body part more often because you can recover quicker. If you're an intermediate, you need to slow down. The definition of an intermediate is you will hit some kind of plateau. You will need to make some kind of change, but you also need to give it sufficient time to enable that change to sink in, and so you can evaluate it. Don't be in a rush. That will keep you in the intermediate stage forever. And finally, when you're advanced, you already have the patience. You already have a good track record. That's when you need complexity. You need optimization to really push it to the next level. In general, in that case, you already have a plan. You already have goals. Perhaps you have competition in mind. You need some sort of more broad scale planning. And also, I would say at this point, those are broad classifications. Your actual prescription will ultimately always have to be personalized. Okay, so I don't disagree there. And this becomes more and more important as you advance from beginner to intermediate to advanced. But yeah, just once again, as a sort of a side note to the beginning of the video, I do believe classifications are useful. I don't believe they're oppressive if used correctly. And I don't want to start, chastising people for using the word beginner because I think that's a bit silly. It's going a bit too far into whole woke culture, and it's not me. But I do feel it's important to know these things, and I've tried to explain in the video why. But I'd love to hear from you guys if you agree or if you disagree. But those are my broad classifications, and that's kind of what I think. So, all right, cool. I will call it there, and I'll speak to you guys in the next video.